And as a brief introduction to myself, my name is Kayla, and I'm a second-year PhD student in the Department of Kinesiology. I have a little bit of personal experience being a GA online as last semester when COVID started, all of our online classes started to happen. So that's my experience.
Sorry, could you all hear me when I just spoke?
Sorry, Katie, I couldn't hear you. I was thinking maybe it was my personal issue.
Sorry about that, guys. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Katie and I'm a PhD student in kinesiology. And I have a few years of experience as a GA. And similarly to Kayla, last semester was my first time getting more hands-on experience GAing online. And now, as some of you have seen already, we're starting a poll to get a sense of how much experience you all have with being a GA or a TA. I'll just give you all a few more seconds to answer if you have not done so already. And so it looks like most of you, this will be your first time being either a GA or a TA, but we do have quite a few of you who do have maybe a year or two of experience as well. So now we're going to see how much experience you all have with being a GA or a TA online. And this may be working with Blackboard with one of your previous courses, maybe submitting assignments or marking assignments online, or maybe you have been a GA or a TA for a course that was hybrid or fully online. Okay, a few more seconds. So again, it seems like many, are you all getting any feedback on my audio? Okay. So it looks like many of you all have not had much experience online, which is great because this course will be an introductory level workshop on what your expectations will be and what types of tasks you will complete as a GA or TA online. And so we appreciate you all sharing that information about yourselves, and that gives us an idea of what levels of experience you all have, and so we can tailor the information in this workshop to best suit your needs. And to give you all an idea of what to expect over the next hour or so, here's an agenda. We will start by providing you with some steps and tasks that you can do prior to the semester starting so that you can prepare for a strong semester. And then we will give an overview of typical expectations that a GA or TA will have in the online learning environment, including any expected tasks that you will complete, as well as methods of communication and how to communicate with students and the instructor, as well as grading and technology expectations. And then we'll go over concerns that are specific to online teaching and learning and provide you all with some more resources to use moving forward. But before we move on, we want to go over a few ground rules for the workshop. So given that we have a variety of departments represented and different levels of experience for the participants and attendees in this workshop, it's important to us that the workshop is helpful for everyone. And so if you have questions along the way, we encourage you to put them into the chat while we continue presenting. We have a couple of other helpers, Laura and Liz, who will be monitoring the chat, and we will also be taking breaks along the way to answer your questions that you put into the chat. So don't worry if we do not answer the question right away. So you may be wondering, I have received my GA or TA assignment. Now what am I supposed to do? First, we advise that you get in contact with the instructor for your course as soon as you can. We recommend sending an email introducing yourself and explaining to them that you are their GA or TA for the semester. And when you communicate with them, it's important that you do not make any assumptions about what you will be doing for the course. As you may know, each course and instructor are different, and getting in contact with the instructor will help you to determine what your roles and responsibilities will be. And then once you get in contact with them, it's important that you ask questions. It's vital that you feel prepared and comfortable, especially in the remote learning environment, so do not hesitate to ask questions. It may also be helpful for you to try to schedule a video call with the instructor, as this may be an easier way to go over expectations as opposed to only going over questions and concerns via email. And for some guidance, here are several general level questions that you can ask the instructor. So you can ask just generally, what do you expect from me in this role? How many hours will I be working each week? And maybe within that, there may be certain weeks where your hours will be heavier than in other weeks, as well as getting an idea of whether you should be attending class. Maybe it's every class or certain classes. And within those class periods, what will my role be as a GA or a TA? Should I be monitoring the chats? Should I be taking notes? Should I be helping you to lead breakout sessions or starting and stopping recordings of the sessions? That type of information. You may also ask, will I be expected to create course content? This could be anything from lab manuals or creating videos, as well as creating or even teaching some of the class periods. And within that, if you are expected to create course content, be sure to ask specific details about what topics should be covered within that material, as well as what format they would like you to make that material in. Maybe it's a PDF instead of a Word document, and that might be important to the instructor, or the video file type, as well as getting an idea of when you should upload it, as well as where you should upload it, and any questions about when it will be available to the students and if you are responsible for making it accessible. And now we're going to get an idea of any other questions that you all think would be important to ask an instructor in terms of general topics about what your expectations or roles will be during this semester. So this is a whiteboard activity where you can enter text about what questions you would like to add onto the whiteboard. And so you may see at the top of your screen a T for a text box, and you can click this and add in any text that you have. And all of the responses are anonymous as well. So I see questions about policy on office hours and availability for students, as well as do you need to have office hours exactly? So maybe you don't need to attend class, but you will have to have office hours. How often should those office hours be? Where to hold them? How quickly should I have assignments and quizzes marked and returned? We'll be talking about that more later as well. These are all really great questions. Yeah, how many hours should be dedicated to marking assignments versus an office hour? So a more specific breakdown of your hours. And you can get a further idea of the breakdown of your hours in the Form 1 document that some of your instructors may have already sent to you. And for students who it's their first time being a GA or TA, the Form 1 document is an agreement between the GA or the TA and the instructor outlining how many hours are dedicated to certain types of tasks, and both of you have to sign it and return it to the department. And I believe that must be done prior to the semester starting. So if you have not received that yet or do not know what I mean when I'm talking about that, we also advise asking the instructor of the course about receiving that from them. Yeah, so how can I be sure that I filled out the necessary forms? I would try to follow up with the instructor as well as contacting one of the secretaries in the department. They may be helpful in providing advice on how to move forward with that, particularly if you're having difficulties contacting the instructor. And what if the scope of my work changes throughout the semester? Yeah, that can be a great question to ask. Your instructor may have a mid-semester review, or may even be straightforward with you up front, saying that the scope may change. Maybe this is their first time teaching online and they're still trying to figure out exactly what their course may look like throughout the semester. And so getting an idea of that would definitely be important throughout. Another question is, do I need to do all of the readings with the students? That's a great question. Okay. And I see a question that you don't have an employee number yet. Yes, you will need an employee number in order to receive payment. And I would contact the secretary in your department to ensure that that gets sorted out. And what if I'm putting in more hours than I'm getting paid? If you are getting close to the hours, or if you're noticing early on that if you are continuing to work the amount of hours putting in each week that you're going to be over the amount that you're getting paid for, you should contact the instructor to let them know. Okay. And now we are going to get into more specific questions in regards to communication. So we'll pull up the slides again. So you can ask whether the instructor expects you to communicate regularly with them. Maybe that would be via email or having weekly check-ins over Microsoft Teams, or you might have a video call chat set up within Blackboard. And you can also ask if there's going to be a mid-semester review, as well as you are expected to be in communication with the other GAs and TAs if your class has multiple GAs or TAs, because sometimes the professor will take the lead on managing the GAs and the TAs, but in other classes you might have a lead GA or TA, or you may all work equally and collaboratively throughout the semester. And you can also ask who you should contact if there's an instance when you cannot fulfill your duties. For example, if you get sick, should you ask another TA or TA to fill in for you, or should you contact the instructor first? As well as other questions related to communication, especially as it relates to communicating with students, include how do I communicate with the students and what method should I use? So maybe email, or only during or before or after class time, or maybe only during its hours. And what's a reasonable time for responding to their emails? I know that some instructors have 24 or 48-hour rules for weekdays, where students cannot ask a GA or a TA about an assignment 24 or 48 hours before an assignment is due, or you may have to respond to all students within 24 or 48 hours of them contacting you. So getting an idea of what those expectations are regarding email communications, as well as getting an understanding of whether the instructor would like to be involved in all of that communication. There are some instructors who would like to be CC'd on any responses to students. That way they can be kept in the loop on what the concerns are of their students, or if a student is contacting them as well, the same issue, then all of the GAs and TAs and the instructor can be on the same page. And so these are just a few communication related questions that we've come up with that can be helpful for you as you get to know your instructor as well as your expectations. And now we will do another whiteboard activity where you all can share what types of communication related questions you all have or think would be helpful for an instructor to answer. So I see in the chat someone said that they were emailed a blank form 1. I would follow up the instructor. That may have been an accident on their part, or maybe they want to meet with you to go over what they will put into the form 1. So I would respond and ask them what the hour breakdown would be and follow up, maybe saying that you'd be happy to have a video call with them if this is something that you would be comfortable with, Josh, and you can work through the form 1 together. But you are not expected to fill it out on your own, just to clarify. And so someone asked, do we have to respond to emails during reading week? Yeah, that's a great question. And I would imagine that some courses are different. Some may expect you to, and some may not. And you may have classes where only the GAs or the TAs will respond during reading week and the instructor won't. And so you may be responsible for handling email the instructor would have typically received. What if the student has poor audio quality? And so this is a good question that we will also be covering a little bit later in the technology section. If a student has poor audio quality as well as internet connections, it may be helpful to try to involve them within the chat or trying to communicate with them via email while their audio is having difficulties. Do we only respond to student emails from their university email account? Typically, yes, and oftentimes an instructor will have this policy within their syllabus that students are expected to email you from their university email and that you will only respond to their university email account. And then for office hours, yes, sometimes they may be more of a call type format because your video may be off, or they may be video chats. In addition, you may have your office hours on Microsoft Teams instead of within the Blackboard site. These are great communication questions. So if there aren't any other questions, we will move forward. So now we'll move into questions related to marking and grading. So you'll want to know what assignments you are responsible for marking. You may have other GAs or TAs in your course, or your instructor may also mark in some cases. So knowing which assignment you're responsible for will help you understand your hourly breakdown, and it can help you create a schedule ahead of time. You may have assignments where, especially if you have multiple GAs or TAs, that each of you will mark a an equal percentage of students, or you may have assignments in which you mark all of them, but then you mark none of a later assignment. And so further seeking clarity about which assignments and how many of the assignments you're responsible for marking will be helpful information to know, as well as knowing when the students will be submitting the assignments, which should be on a syllabus, but if it's not, you can ask the instructor on when the due dates are for assignments, as well as when you are expected to submit the marks. So this will be helpful as you plan your semester to know when the busier times are and where more of your hours will be allocated at a time. In regards to how you will be marking, it may be helpful to ask if the instructor will be using rubrics to help guide how you mark assignments, as well as if they will be responsible for making and providing you with the rubric, or if you are expected to create the rubric. And you may also ask if the two of you, as in you instructor, will go over how to mark an assignment together before you have to mark one on your own. And I've had several instructors do this to help ensure that we're on the same page, and it can be really helpful. And you can also ask how much feedback you're expected to include on an assignment. So some instructors may expect details within a document, for example, if it's a written paper, or you may expect to give a feedback paragraph at the very end. And understanding the expectations about how to mark each assignment will be helpful to make sure that you are providing students with necessary feedback that aligns with what the instructor hopes that their students are receiving. And these types of questions may be more helpful to ask throughout the semester as assignments pop up, rather than asking about these assignments all at the beginning of the semester. And then lastly, it's important to know where you're going to retrieve the assignments, as well as where you're expected to mark them and where to submit the marks. So some classes may have assignments submitted via email rather than on Blackboard. And so that could be two different avenues in which you'd have to obtain the assignment before you can mark it. As well as you may be expected to provide feedback directly onto Blackboard, or maybe they would like you to provide track changes in a Word doc instead. And so once you have marked everything, your instructor may want to know what the marks are prior to you submitting them onto Blackboard. That way they can know maybe what the class average is, any areas where students were particularly struggling, so that they can address that in a later class. And lastly, you can ask how the students are accessing the grades. So if it's on Blackboard, when does the instructor want you to make the grades accessible or available on Blackboard? And there are other workshops and resources online that can help you to learn how to make things available on Blackboard or how to make them hidden from students. As well as, will you be responsible for releasing the grades in the grade column of the grade center on Blackboard? So these are all good questions to give you a strong starting point as it relates to grading and marking. And now we'll do another whiteboard activity where you can add other questions that you think will be helpful to ask as it relates specifically to marking or grading. So should we mark strictly or leniently? This is similar to whether or not you have a rubric as you grade. And so some instructors may have a rubric and others may not, but typically the instructor will want a somewhat strict system so that there isn't much variability between marks that students receive, but getting an idea of how close the response should be to what the expected response should be as you're marking, and understanding how strict that is very helpful as you have to mark throughout the semester. How do you prefer that a GA or TA handle student complaints about a mark? Sometimes an instructor may have you forward that directly to the instructor. And getting a sense of what their expectations for you about how to handle complaints will be helpful, because there are many classes in which that does happen. Similarly to if a student is not satisfied with their grade, trying to explain how you arrived at your mark for maybe it's a specific question that they have an issue with how you marked, or maybe it's the whole assignment, but providing them with further explanation outside of the feedback that's directly on the assignment may help put them at ease and clarify why they received the mark that they received. As well as, if you've never worked with Blackboard, will the professor walk you through that? Sometimes an instructor will, however, we recommend utilizing the resources that are on the Center for Teaching and Learning website, which we'll be sharing with you all later, as well as attending other GATAcademy workshops if you can, just in case the instructor does not walk you through it. Policies surrounding grading late assignments will hopefully be included in the course syllabus, but if they aren't, just continue to ask the instructor. And good questions related to contacting the professors if you're uncertain about a mark, or if you think there is an error. And then suppose the professor says that the average for the class must be no more than 80%, but you know that the student deserves a 100% for their work. Typically, in almost any instance, you should always mark to what the student deserves. I don't know an instance when you wouldn't do that. If you're having any worries about giving a certain mark based on expectations that the professor gave you, I would talk to the professor and explain the situation that you're in and work with them through that issue. And so now, if there aren't any other questions related to grading, we will move on to technology-related questions. So similarly to what we mentioned earlier about if you are expected to create course content, maybe you aren't expected to create it, but you are expected to upload it. So how should you do that? What file format should it be used in and uploaded in, as well as where to upload it on the Blackboard site? You may also want to ask if all of the videos need to have closed captions or other accessibility related features that should be added in. And if you are a GA or a TA who holds office hours, you should clarify with the instructor where those office hours should take place, maybe on Blackboard or Microsoft Teams, as well as how often those should take place. Maybe they are only by appointment, or they are 1 or 2 hours per week. Maybe they are only directly before and after a major assignment. So getting an idea of whether or not you hold office hours, where to hold them, as well as when to hold them, would be important information to know right at the start of the semester. And lastly, getting in contact with other GAs and TAs. If you have a class with multiple GAs and TAs, it's important that you get connected with them, and then you can have peers that you can collaborate with throughout this semester. And now we're going to do another whiteboard activity where you can add any other questions that you all think are important to ask the instructor as it relates to technology. So I see a question in the chat. Are these workshops payable? Is that why we need this? These workshops are not payable, as well as the instructors do not get paid, but getting involved with these workshops will help you feel more prepared, and it will allow you to be more efficient within your paid work as a GA or a TA. And if I misinterpreted that question and it means, can these workshops work towards payable hours for your GA or TA ship? That would be a question for your instructor. That will probably vary by instructor. I wouldn't assume that your instructor will be including this as payable hours. That is the safe assumption, is to assume that you are not getting paid, or these are not being considered hours of your GA or TA experience. And so what should you do if your Wi-Fi is down? So maybe creating a plan with your instructor ahead of time on what the proper protocols would be if that happens, because it may also happen where your instructor's Wi-Fi goes down, either before a class, in the middle of a class, and they may want you to take over. And so, yeah, definitely getting an understanding of what those protocols and processes should be if there are any technical difficulties like that. Yeah, as well as getting an understanding of if you should set up the Teams call. And then that way you guys can inform the students on what the protocols would be for a Teams related office hours, and getting an understanding of how much technical or technological competence you should have prior to the semester starting. Because there may be courses where you're only expected to mark assignments on Blackboard, and that's the extent of it. Maybe you never have to attend class, and so your level of competency will vary. And then similarly to if Wi-Fi goes down, how would you like me to address students' technological concerns or errors? Yeah, setting up a protocol and a process prior to any of those errors happening will help it be a less stressful and smoother process throughout the semester, as well as knowing whether you're allowed to use Teams to have any sessions with students, and if students will be given a tutorial to use Blackboard Collaborate. And is there a go-to person if I have a technical problem? Some departments have staff members that are specific to this type of issue, or maybe there is someone else that the instructor can guide you to. These are great questions as it relates to technology. If there aren't any other questions, we're now going to move on.
Thanks, Katie, for all of that great information. So now we're going to move on to step 2, which is contact other GAs or TAs for the same course that you are a GA or TA for. So this may not actually apply to everyone because in some cases you may be the only GA or TA for your class, but in other cases you may have other GAs or TAs as well. So we recommend that you try to build a community. So this is an unusual time for everyone, so get to know the other GAs or TAs for your course, so this way you can support each other as you go through the semester. As well, utilize different online resources so you can try to do some of your tasks together. So for instance, you can use different platforms for video chatting and actually mark together. However, keep in mind that whatever platform you use, make sure you're not using a room that students have access to, because you want to make sure that when you're marking, you're having private conversations. So for instance, a room like this, where all of the attendees can come in and go, you don't want that when you're marking. Make sure it's just you and the other GAs or TAs. Another great resource is other GAs or TAs who have already taught the course you are assigned. There will be matters specific to varying departments, so the best thing to do is to talk to someone with previous experience, especially if you can talk to someone who was a GA or TA for the class last semester. That would probably be really beneficial because they have an idea of how the course was potentially taught online. And then step 3 is to take ownership. So own your duties and responsibilities. So you're taking a great step by attending this workshop today to take responsibility for what your tasks are going to be. So another good thing to do, so you have a good idea of the course and what's going to occur throughout the semester, is know the syllabus in detail. So some important things to consider are how should academic dishonesty be addressed? So if you catch someone cheating, which may be more difficult with the online classroom, how are you supposed to act? What does this instructor want you to do in this instance? Additionally, there are more steps that you might need to take for accessibility accommodations for individuals. If you are responsible to interact with students and hold office hours, make sure this information is made clear and available to students. So have your email posted somewhere as well as your actual office hours. So are they by appointment or are they at specific times every week? In regards to your responsibilities and duties as well, make sure you're being organized. This will help you with your own studies and it'll help you as your role as a GA or TA. A great way to stay organized is to use a planner. So write down everything that you have going on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. And another thing you can do that's super easy and free is just print off calendar templates from Microsoft and plug in all the important days where you have something due for yourself or something due for your GA or TA class. And this way you can visually see your months and what's going on, and you have a good idea of when everything's due and when you have really busy sessions throughout the semester. So to go off of that, like I said, make sure you know when assignments are due. When do you need to submit marks for the assignments that you're responsible to mark? And when are the busy points in the semester? So determine the busy points of the semester so you can adjust your own schedule. This may depend on the classes you're taking, but I know in graduate school, we have some flexibility with picking our presentation dates. So if you have an idea of a time when you're going to be really busy, marking a bunch of papers, maybe try not to pick your own presentation date around that time frame. So also make sure that you develop your GA and TA skills. So today is a great first step towards that as you're taking advantage of resources in preparation for this semester. All of the links to for this workshop and other workshops will be available, so continue to utilize those. As well, keep in mind these resources do not expire, and if you find yourself having additional questions as the semester continues, continue to capitalize on all of these different resources so your role as a GA or TA is made as simple as possible for you. As well, marking can be a difficult task, especially if you are marking a new form of assessment, such as a paper, so do not be afraid to ask the instructor for clarification if any questions arise. So understand the marking expectations for each assignment and don't be afraid to ask for further clarification. This can help you a lot, and it also will help you save time because you'll be able to just get down to the assignment and mark appropriate without wondering if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing and if the instructor is going to be concerned about how you're marking assignments. As well, if you're going to hold office hours or lead labs or even lecture yourself, make sure you know how and where to meet the students. So practice with the online classroom platforms. So for Blackboard, you should have your own sandbox. So just like we're meeting today in a virtual classroom, take some time to figure out how you enter the virtual classroom as an instructor and what are the different settings and things that you can change for yourself if you're the one who's actually leading a class. As well, some instructors may be using Microsoft Teams instead, so become familiar with this platform as well. And if you're going to have to upload content to the course site on Blackboard, become familiar with navigating and operating the site as an instructor. For example, do you know how to input grades and work with the Grade Center? Keep in mind that working with Blackboard as an instructor and from this view is completely different than what you experience as a student when you log on to one of your course sites. Another thing to keep in mind as a GA or TA is that this is a difficult time. So just know that there are many resources you can direct students to help with mental health and anxiety. So there are student counseling centers on campus where counselors are readily available to help students as needed. And before we continue on, if you have any questions, just take a minute now to please post them in the chat. So I'll wait a couple minutes, and if there's no questions, we'll just continue on with the workshop. Alrighty, I don't see anything related to the topics we just discussed, so I'm just going to continue on. All right, so now we're going to move into some online concerns you may be having. What do we do if we have a poor internet connection? So make sure that you take some time before the semester starts to find the best internet location in your house. As well, there's different tactics you can use to find the best internet connection. So perhaps this means sitting close to your router, or at other times if you get an Ethernet cord, that can also help with your connection. If you're having a lot of online meetings, try actually turning off the video because this can help with your connection a lot. So this means you'd more so just have a conversation through audio, which works well. And if you have larger groups, it's especially important to consider turning off your video, kind of like what we did today, and just utilize audio. In other instances, you audio and video turned off as well. If you have to offer some type of online workshop or lab or class, have a backup plan if your internet does end up failing. So what are you going to do? Perhaps you're going to just take some time during that lecture that was supposed to be online and just record it through PowerPoint or some other resource and just tell the students that you'll be posting the recording online as soon as possible once you're finished. If you have a Blackboard related problem, there's different tactics you can use. We'll be discussing later. There's some other resources. So you can complete different tickets for IT to see if they can help you solve your problem. As well, it's just important that you continue to take training and use different resources so that you know as much as you can before the semester starts of how to react in these unpredictable situations.
I see that we have someone with their hand up. If you could ask your question in the chat, or you would feel more comfortable sending a private message to one of the moderators, we're happy to help.
Thank you, Katie. Okay. So teaching online. So if you will be having your own labs or your own lectures, perhaps it would be beneficial if you sent some of the information or the assignments and activities to the students before they came to the online class. So you can include practice problems, you can do think, pair, share activities. As well, a great feature with the Blackboard Classroom is the use of breakout rooms. So what happens is students can actually go up into smaller rooms and you can send them with a question or a case study, and then you can have everyone come back to the big group and you can discuss the answers and their findings together. If you find that you're lecturing and you ask a question and a student isn't, or multiple students aren't providing you with the correct answer, then perhaps you need to take some time to re-explain the concept. Maybe it's a little more difficult for students to grasp things in this online setting, so be patient with their questions and their learning. As well, become familiar with how to add closed captions to videos and pre-recordings to be able to address any accessibility issues that students may have. And then when it comes to answering questions for students, what if they're asking you questions that are beyond your posted office hours? Keep in mind that students may have conflicts with some of their other classes, so you may need to be a little flexible in providing them with responses. So maybe this means that you don't really have time to meet online, so try to provide them with responses through email, and this may be an easy solution for some questions. Make sure though, especially if you have a lot of students contacting you outside of your office hours, I would talk to the instructor about this to see how they want you to proceed. As well, just make sure you're always keeping track of your hours. In this way, by the end of the semester, you'll have an idea and you can provide updates to the instructors as the semester goes along so that they know if you're reaching your hours limit. As well, in regards to answering questions, if it's an instance where students seem to be emailing you instead of coming to some of your virtual office hours and it's too difficult to answer these questions by email, then don't force it. Suggest with the students that you can meet via video chat to address some of their questions. Sometimes it's a lot easier just to meet face-to-face virtually to address some of their questions and explain concepts. And if you do have to meet students online, how do you go about this? Well, Microsoft Teams allows you to schedule separate sessions with a specific student or group of students. And as mentioned previously, Blackboard allows for breakout rooms with a specific student or students. So these are two great resources that allow you to meet online with students in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting. So before we continue on again, do you have any further questions in regards to any of the content just discussed? And just please post them in the chat. So I see a question in the chat that says, I was told that my GATAcademy workshops are required by my faculty to attend, but I'm not sure how many of the workshops I'm expected to attend. So I think this is a department related question. So I would reach out to someone in your department and ask more details about what these requirements are. And as Katie mentioned earlier too, I would see if these hours are actually going towards GATA contract hours as well. So there is a question regarding how do we add closed captions? Is there an easy way to do this? So this is just a thought we wanted you to keep in mind. There's actually detailed workshops out there that will provide you with information on how to do this. And if there's no other questions, we'll continue on. Okay. So this workshop was just to try to get you to start thinking of all of the different questions, concerns you may have as a GATA or online. But ultimately what we want to do is direct you to other resources that can go into way more detail about all of the different topics discussed today. So we'll provide you with links to all of these different resources in the chat at the end of the workshop. But to begin, there's the option of engaging students. So if you will be teaching labs, lectures, whatever it is, there are some great resources out there that can help you with how you can keep your students engaged in these activities. As well, you're already familiar with this, but make sure that you continue to capitalize on the workshops that are being offered this week through the GATacademy, as this will put you in a really good position when the semester starts in about a week and a half. There's also other workshops offered through for GATAs that can further hopefully answer some more of your questions in detail and your concerns. And there's a really detailed Wiki page in regards to Blackboard, so you can become very familiar with how to operate this site in detail. And then if you end up having specific concerns in regards to the new online situation with COVID-19, there are different workshops at this link, as well as different resources. And if you get into Blackboard and you have more specific questions or you want some live help, then you can actually join the BB Cafe and join the virtual help desk and meet with someone in real time to discuss any of your issues or problems. And sometimes you may have IT issues that aren't Blackboard specific, so perhaps you're working with Microsoft Teams or it has something to do with your email and other forms of communication with students. Then you can submit IT tickets with your specific detailed request and someone will get back to you and help you. Does anyone have any further questions? So I see a question about how many hours do we need to work per, oh, that might have already been answered. Okay. So there's a question about what is the name of the workshop that covers how to add closed captions. We can get back to you on that and we can probably send you a link when we send the recording, unless Liz has the answer to that right now. So then there's another question, how do we log our hours worked? So typically for myself, when I've been a GA in the past, I've just used an Excel document and kept track of all of my hours, and I broke it down by office hours, email inquiries, marking, and even when it comes to marking, I even break it down per assignment, and I keep track of it that way, and I always just fill in the specific date and how many hours I worked that day on whatever task I was required to work on. And once again, if you don't have an employee number, I would contact the secretary for your department. And here it says that someone messaged HR today. So I'd say those are the right individuals to be contacting for that. And it says you get paid assuming those hours are worked, the amount you get paid period is fixed. Yes, so that's typically how it works. But like we've said, just make sure that you record all of your hours so you can ensure that you don't go over. tips for pacing and not rushing through content in an online session. So I think whether you're teaching online or in person, I think a great way to make sure that you have a good pace is just to practice. Make sure you're familiar with the content that you will be teaching to students. And maybe if there's other Js or Ts in your class, you can actually practice with one another before you have to individually lead some sessions.
You could also, to add on to that, for tips for pacing, you could also create a lesson plan prior to, and that may give you a better idea of which sections of your lecture or your lesson are going to contain more time or less time so that you can ensure that you are taking up the full class period or the desired amount of time that you'd like to use.
There's something about, is it fixed income? So I know in our department when we start, we have a fixed amount. We just keep track of our hours to make sure we fulfill that and that we don't go over. How do you sign up for more workshops? So however you signed up for this workshop, you can do that in a similar way for other GATAcademy workshops, and then we will be providing you with other links for other resources. Does this recording of hours go to your professor or HR? So in our department, I know that we record hours just to keep our instructors up to date on how many hours we are working. So, and Liz just posted in the chat the link for a workshop regarding captioning and how to register for that workshop. So is there an easy way to contact other Gs or TAs? Can we ask that for the professor or our faculty? So yes, step one would be to contact the instructor for your course and ask him or her who the other Gs or TAs are, and if you can have their contact information. Do we get notified if there has been a discussion on our GAT application as to whether we've been accepted or not? So in the past, we've always been notified in our department that we've been granted a GA or TA position. So I would contact a department secretary to see if the acceptances haven't been sent out yet or what your role is. How do you format the Excel document for logging hours? So this is really a personal preference. You can go about it however you prefer. Usually I just have a column that has the task, so whether it's office hours or marking, and then I have a column that says the date, and then I have another column where I enter in just the number of hours. So like 2.5, half an hour. And this way too, then the column where you enter all your hours, you can do a quick sum function to add up all your hours as you go through the semester to know where you're at. And you can continue to post your questions. So I'm just going to share a few links in our chat. So here's a link about how to use the virtual classroom in more detail. And then I'm just going to post one about engaging students. So there'll be 2 links here. And then no, the virtual classroom is run by Blackboard Collaborate.
Sometimes on a Blackboard site, the tab on the left may be called Virtual Classroom. And when you click that link or tab on the side, it will then take you to what is technically called Blackboard Collaborate or Blackboard Collaborate Ultra.
There's a link to other GATA workshop registration. And here's a link to the Blackboard Wiki page. And I would suggest, as I'm going along and posting these links, I would take a minute and just copy them over, because when we post the recording, from my understanding, the chat isn't saved.
To follow up on the question about whether these workshops count towards your hours, this will vary by instructor, and we recommend asking your instructor if they will be counting the workshops towards your hours. But we would not recommend assuming that the workshops do count.
So I just posted a link for the COVID preparedness as well. And this is the one for, I'm going to just post one for the BB Cafe. So that's if you want real-time help for any of your Blackboard concerns. And then for more of your general IT concerns, here is the link to submit an IT ticket. And then I see that the COVID link does not work.
I have resubmitted the link. Hopefully this new link works.
Okay. Perfect.
Great.
Now, does anyone have any other questions before we wrap up today?
And feel free to hang on into the call or into this workshop if you still have more questions. And if you don't have any questions, feel free to leave if you don't want to hang around. And as Liz mentioned in the chat, there is a feedback form that we would like you all as attendees to fill out. And she just added the link within the chat. And yes to the question, is it best to ask the professors first? Yes. Given that all professors and classes can be quite different and what the expectations are, asking your professor is highly recommended as the first option. Regarding Blackboard Collaborate, starting from which date, can you clarify what you mean by starting from which date as it relates to Blackboard Collaborate? And I agree with Carson's comments. Typically, the instructor is not looking closely at how your hours break down, though that may be something that is of interest to them, of how many hours you're working per week, and that typically discussing hours throughout the semester with the instructor really only comes into play if you feel like you're getting close to going over your hours, because as we've mentioned, in most cases, the salary is fixed, and so you will get paid a fixed amount regardless of whether you hit your full weekly hours. Say you're supposed to work 10 hours per week, but the instructor doesn't provide you with enough work to meet 10 hours, you will still get paid as though you did 10 hours. So the instructor will not really mind how many hours you're working unless you end up going over.
And I just know from personal experience, some instructors do like to look at your hours, so they know for future reference how long a typical assignment will take for GAs to mark or TAs to mark, so then they can adjust that accordingly in the future to make sure that all of their GAs have enough and not too much work.
So to clarify, we do recommend that you keep track personally, regardless of whether the instructor would like to view it. That will always benefit you.
And then I see a question, where do we find the recorded workshop? From my understanding, this will be sent to you after today's session.
To everyone that is leaving, thank you all for attending.
So yes, the recording to the workshop will be sent to you within the next couple days, as Liz stated in the group chat. And thank you for attending today. And I see someone just raised their hand. So once again, if you have a question, if you can just please post it in the chat, that would be great.
Thank you everyone for the kind words.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Alrighty, if no one has any further questions, we're going to, oh, there's a question. From my understanding, it's available when like it has certain days and times posted. So as long as you're within that time frame, you should be able to have access to it.
Another side note is that in addition to the workshops that are formatted like the one that you're currently in, where it's two instructors or however many instructors speaking to you and interacting through a chat, there are also self-paced courses that are shorter in length. It's not a full semester course, though you can take it however short or long that you'd like, given that it's self-paced. And those courses are specific to helping with Blackboard features or tasks. So they're on Blackboard, teaching you how to use Blackboard. And they are self-paced, and you can register for them through the same links as the workshops and navigate through the CTO website that Kayla already shared earlier.
All right, so I think we'll stop sharing our audio and video and end this workshop. Thank you for everyone for coming today.